This assignment is for standard RL 6.2. In this one, we are working on summarizing a literary work. Specifically, we're working with finding the central idea of literature. To begin, please make sure that you have this packet and something to write with. Always begin by putting your name on your paper, just like I've just done. Include the date and your English period, whether it be first, third, fifth, or sixth. Today we're talking about summarizing a literary work. We've talked about different elements of this quite a bit. In this section, the main question to think about is anytime someone asks you, so what was that book about, or what did you read about? Your response is usually to give a brief account of what happened in the book or the story. You tell about the characters, you talk about the main events, you give just enough details to help your friend have an idea of the story. This is what summarizing is. You've probably given summaries like this countless times for book stories, movies, TV programs, family vacations, holiday get-togethers, and Saturday afternoon outings with friends. Summarizing is something that's part of your life, and it always will be. In order to summarize, you first need to know a central idea. A central idea is the most important point. Notice I didn't write that the central idea is what something is about. This is specifically talking about the topic of a text. We're looking for the most important point. That's what makes it the central idea, is that it's the most important, not just a general information about what it is. When we summarize, this means to give a brief account of the main ideas or events and the most important details. Let's write that definition down. So we are giving a brief, that means short, account, which is like a retelling of the main idea or events and the most important details. Make sure that you have the definitions for both of our key terms. We're going to talk about the characteristics of a good summary. In school, you'll often be asked to summarize a text. You want to first think about what the text is mainly about, or the central idea. Then, you'll state in your own words the main ideas or the events and the important details. You want to include important details only. Remember that you're just summarizing, not restating the whole text. Also, you shouldn't include your opinion or your judgment. We think is important, of course, but it doesn't belong in a summary. So, characteristics of our summary are brief, retelling of the main idea and details. And I'm going to put in parentheses here, own words. You're not just writing down what the author already said. And then the other characteristic is that it is what is called objective. And an objective summary does not contain your opinions. Now, it can certainly include the opinions of the author, but not your opinions. You are just summarizing what the author said. Now, one of my favorite strategies to use when talking about the central idea to be able to find and write a summary is the 2 W's. And our 2 W's strategy, I'm going to make it fancy, our 2 W's stands for who plus what. There are my 2 W's right there. Who plus what. And using the 2 W's can help us to find a main idea of a text. Let's go ahead and practice working with main idea and supporting details. Here's our passage. It's called Incident on Main Street. The band marched up Main Street, the drums thundering, the saxophones pumping out oompapas. Jimmy Hobbs sat on his father's shoulders, beating time with his fists. It was a grand party for the town, a celebration of its 100th anniversary. As the band approached the intersection with 2nd Street, Mr. George Weston, the town's former mayor, came riding a horse down the cross street. No one had ever seen him ride a horse before, and no one could imagine why he was trying it now. Somehow, though, he'd gotten himself on a horse, and he was flapping and holding on for dear life as the horse pounded at a full gallop down 2nd Street. Unless someone stopped him, it seemed certain that the band and the horse would collide. It was likewise certain that Mr. Weston wasn't going to stop on his own, no matter how badly he wanted to. So it was up to the band, but there was no certainty it could stop either. No one in the band could even see up 2nd Street, since their view was blocked by the crowd. Let's take a look at our questions. Question number 1 asks us, what is the main idea of paragraph 2? In order to answer this question, I need to label my paragraphs. So I want to take a look, and I'm just going to label my paragraph. I look at for the indentions, 1, paragraph 2, and paragraph 3. Now, before I even start, I'm going to think about the 2W strategy, and I'm also going to be working today with a tree map. So I'm going to set up my tree map in this space that I have right now with my main idea in the top box. Even if I don't have room in my assignment or my test to do this, I'm always going to try to use a tree map if I have time. It really helps me to clarify my main idea and supporting details. I want to look at the second paragraph again, and as I look at the second paragraph, I want to think about who was this section mostly about. Well, I learned about the band, and I learned about Mr. George Weston, the town's former mayor. I think that this is mostly about the town's former mayor, so I'm going to put Mr. Weston is my who, and the what that he does. What is he mostly doing in this section? Well, it sounds like he's riding a horse down the cross street, that no one's ever seen him ride a horse before. That's pretty interesting. It says that he's flapping and holding on for dear life. It sounds like he's riding a horse, and it seems like things are pretty out of control. So I'm going to say Mr. Weston, and I'm going to put riding horse under unusual circumstances. Now, before I commit to this answer and I write it on my lines, I want to check to see that my details support this answer. One of the things that you may have noticed is that I underlined some key details as I reread through this paragraph. The things that I highlighted were that he was riding a street, down the street. No one had ever seen him before, and he was holding on for dear life, which tells me that he was a little bit scared by this. Let's put those details here in my tree map. So I'm going to add here, he is riding a horse in the street. We've got that no one's seen this before. No one's seen before. And he's holding on for dear life. Now I can check to see that each of my details supports my main idea. Is the fact that he was riding a horse in the street an example of how he was riding a horse under unusual circumstances? Yeah, riding a horse in the street is pretty unusual. And then no one's ever seen him before, that's pretty unusual too. He's holding on for dear life, that's also unusual. So my main idea checks out because I have 3 supporting details all from this paragraph that back it up. Now I can go back to my question. What is the main idea of paragraph 2? So I'll say, in paragraph 2, comma, and then I'm going to put the top part of my tree map in a full sentence. Mr. Weston, and I'll give some context, the former mayor, is riding a horse under unusual circumstances. All right, and then what are 2 important details that we include in a summary if we were to write one based on our tree map? I could use any of these details. I could put that he's riding a horse on the street, no one's seen him before, and that he's holding on for dear life. I'll put he's that no one has seen him ride a horse before, and I'll put that he is holding on for dear life. Looks pretty good. I think we're ready to move to the second practice problem. Before we do our second practice problem, here's today's treasure hunt find. This is Squishy. He used to be our class pet last year. If our behavior is good at the beginning of the second semester, then I'll bring him back to the classroom and he'll be our class pet once again. Say hi to Squishy. Go ahead and record him on your scavenger hunt and continue the lesson. All right, let's continue. Our third question asks us, what is the main idea of paragraph 3? Now, before I even look at paragraph 3, I'm going to set up my tree map again. So here, even though it's squished, I'm going to make sure that I have space, or at least the reminder, to use the tree map. And as a quick reminder, I'll also put that I'm going to use my 2W strategy. Let me take a look again at paragraph 3. I see again, and as I read this, I have a feeling I'm going to need my supporting details, so I'm going to look for them as I read. Unless someone stopped him, it seemed certain that the band and the horse would collide. It was, that's pretty important. The band and the horse would collide. That's like crash. It was likewise certain that Mr. Weston wasn't going to stop on his own, no matter how badly he wanted to. So Mr. Weston wasn't going to be able to stand on his own. So it was up to the band. But there was no certainty it could stop either. All right, so the band couldn't stop. Mr. Weston couldn't stop. No one in the band could even see up 2nd Street since their view was blocked by the crowd. I think that's important too. This time I'm going to work backwards. I'm going to include my supporting details first. So I see that one detail I underlined was that Mr. Weston couldn't stop on his own. I also saw that the band couldn't stop either. And lastly, one of the details I underlined was that the band and Weston were going to crash. Now, I can figure out my main idea with the 2 W's. The who in this passage is actually 2 different things, I think. Mr. Weston and the band. So I'll put Mr. Weston and the band is my first W, the who. And then what's going to happen? I'm going to say are about to collide. Let me check. Is this an example of how they might collide? Yeah, Mr. Weston couldn't stop on his own. Is this an example? Yep, the band couldn't stop either. And is this one? They're going to crash? Looks good. Now I'm ready to transfer this information into my actual answers. So again, I'll put in paragraph 3, and then I'm going to include my main idea. Then I can list 2 of my most important details. How do I know that that was my main idea? Once you've completed this portion of the lesson, if you feel like you've mastered the objective or you're ready to master it, go ahead and move on to your proving behavior. You have 2 passages to read, and in the first passage you'll create a tree map with this main idea that's already here. You can go ahead if you want to and put a square around it so that you don't need to rewrite it. Make sure to include your branches to help you with your supporting details. In the second passage, you'll answer this multiple choice question. Your goal here is to include 3 supporting details and get this question correct. That will show that you've mastered the objective. Good luck and thanks for watching.